Oh yeah.
Okay, hello, welcome. Welcome to Anatomy of a Scene. My name is Jon Massey. I'm the writer and director of Frank James. I'm here with Chris Muto and Angie Patterson. And we're just going to do a little round of introductions and tell a little bit about yourselves and maybe a little bit of a history and bio. Chris, I'll say, ladies go first, so we'll go with Angie first.
Hi.
So you just want me to go ahead?
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about, so you were born in LA, correct?
LA. I was actually born in West Covina, which is maybe about 45 minutes or so outside of LA. Didn't come to LA to live here until I was 19.
Oh, okay. Great.
A Southern California native, yes.
Great. So you're, you played Maria James in Frank James. You're also a writer and producer yourself. You did a short film not so long ago called Moctress, which is phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
And it really, as a parent of twins, the balancing act of kids and work and the film industry, it definitely hit a real nerve with me. So you were in American Crime Story, Goliath. So you've been acting professionally for pretty much.
Yeah, I came out here at 19 to go to Stella Adler Academy of Acting, and I did, studied there for a while. Shortly after that, got my first manager and started working. My very first credit was on the pilot episode of Entourage. That was my first job. Got my SAG card that way, and racked up some other TV and movie credits along the way. And when I wrote Moctress, it was really because all the things on my reel were these little one-liners, and for anyone to for me to get agency meetings or for me to get into casting offices, they're like, we need to see more tape, and this is now actors are expected to be writers as well and always be writing their own material. It's the only way to survive at this point and get yourself seen. And that was kind of at the beginning of that time. So they say write what you know. The story is I'm not a single mom. Thank God. I can't even imagine that struggle. But I basically told the story of a single mom who's trying to be an actress, and just the big lows and those tiny victories that get you through as it is being an actor. I mean, I always say it's like a bad relationship. It's it doesn't love you back that well. It's always a struggle, but when it's good, it's good. You stay for those highs, and that's just how it is. But been working as steadily as I can since then.
Great. Well, and Chris, so in case anybody doesn't know, Chris and Angie are married. Interestingly enough, the photo in Frank James is their photo. So so that's so. And Chris, you wrote and produced your own film, the Accidental Reality Star. You're from New York, though, in case.
From upstate New York, small town called Frankfurt, and great time growing up, great community, and gosh, so many great memories. But yeah, here we are out here in Hollywood. I met my beautiful wife, gosh, almost a little bit over 15 years ago. We're coming up on 10 years being married, and we got two beautiful children. And to get to work opposite of my wife, who's so talented, and she actually coaches me quite a bit.
We coach each other.
She's the best one for me, to say, BS on when I'm,
it's
during my work sometimes.
Because we know each other so well.
Exactly.
he knows what my crutches are. I know what his crutches are.
Yep.
And for someone else, it actually might fly. Like someone else might not notice it, but I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that's the thing you do.
Yeah.
Same thing to me.
So we
Yeah.
no tracks for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get into that because certainly, you know, obviously working together in this scene, you know, when, you know, I'll talk a little bit about how we got here. You know, this is, so Frank James is, you know, well, first of all, a little bit about me. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I've lived in LA since '91. You know, I've been writing since my time here, but I'm also a visual effects supervisor, working in television. I've been doing a lot of that. And this was sort of a passion project of mine that I wrote originally as a feature. And then as I sort of, you know, television started coming up and, you know, the streaming and, you know, Netflix and some of the, you know, the stigma to working in television. Everybody comes out here to work in film. Very few people come out here to work in television. You know, it's like, oh, I want to be a movie star. You don't say I'm going to be a TV star. So a lot of the, you know, so then I rewrote it as a 1 hour episodic. You know, a lot of like, you know, The Wire was really inspiring. You know, there's just a lot of, you know, HBO kind of really took that edge off of, you know, it's like, okay, I can work in film and in television. And, you know, and then, you know, the interesting story with Chris is I've known Chris for quite a while. and I've had the script since probably 94, 95, a little bit then. And I've never really put two and two together until, you know, I was thinking about doing like a scene study. And I was like, oh, you know, Chris would be really, oh, wow, Chris actually would be fantastic in it. And then and I said, oh, well, do you think do you think Angie would be interested in playing Maria? And Chris and I started working on it, and he said, you know, Jon, you should really do this as a web series. Because I talked about shooting, like just shooting the scene, and I started thinking like, oh, yeah, you know, you're right. How can I break this out and make it into small chunks that I can then, you know, produce myself or film myself? And so, you know, that's kind of like I don't know whether to thank you or to curse you. You kind of started on this journey. Yeah. So that's sort of, you know, how it, you know, the ball started getting rolling. And, you know, so we started shooting last year, 2019. And it feels like, I mean, you started to get those updates on Facebook, like, hey, this is where you were last year. And
It's crazy.
I'm like, really? Oh my goodness, it's been a year. So the first scene that we shot, we actually got to rehearse, and for the weekend before, which was really in television in a lot of things is unheard of, and so that was a really great experience, and that was sort of what made me think of doing this, because being able to do that rehearsal and have those discussions, you know, I have a lot of notes about it, and, you know, made me really think about, doing this sort of, you know, the actor-director relationship. And, you know, so what I'd like to do is just bring up a little bit of the clip that we're going to be talking about. And this is the opening. This is in episode 1, and it's when Frank arrives. So he's arrived home. He's been out all night looking for a kid, and this is him coming home. And
I got the day off.
You know, so this is Maria's packing up her stuff. She didn't think he would be home from work since it's the morning and the day. So, and this is the divorce papers.
Yep.
and a picture of Angie and Chris that
Yeah,
I think it was your mother that said, "Oh my goodness, they used your photo."
Did you move in with him?
Don't make this about him. This was always about us.
It is about him. He's sleeping with my wife.
Papers are on the dresser. All you have to do is sign them.
It's not what I want.
Well, I'm sorry. It's what I want. I don't have time to go through this again. I have to be at City Hall soon.
I guess working with him will help out your career.
Frank, this has started long before him. Don't use him as the reason.
But you are. You should have just said you wanted out. You knew what it was going to be like.
That is not a valid argument. We've been over this. Yeah, maybe I should have known better. But you didn't meet me in the middle. You didn't make the same sacrifices as me. My life is my home. It's right here. Yours is out there in the street. You need someone you can come home to and tell them about your day. Tell them how you almost got shot or how you saw someone laying in the gutter. I'm just not that person. It's everything I'm trying to get away from. I don't look for trouble like you do. I've had enough of it, and now I want my life back. Just want out. As soon as this next case is over, I'm moving out of this city. I don't want this. Not here. This is not a place I want to raise my kids.
And this is where she realizes she's made a mistake and slipped a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pregnant. It's not what you think. It wasn't planned.
Wow. It's not? This isn't about you wanting your life back. It's about me not being able to give you a life.
That's not it at all.
But it's the one thing that'll never change, isn't it?
I know how you see it, but it just happened. It wasn't intentional.
I suppose it wasn't. But it's happening now.
Look, I still want us to be able to.
Yes, Amy.
So I'm gonna pause it there. I'd love to just this was part of the scene I wanted to discuss and about some of the choices that we made. We got to rehearse this scene the week before and some of the blocking and things like that. But first I wanted to just kind of talk about your preparation for the role. I think, Chris, I sent you the script first, the whole 1 hour pilot.
Mm-hmm.
About sort of your process for, your knowing that you're going to play a part as opposed to, I guess, a rehearsal, knowing that you're going to go in and read for a part.
Sure.
I guess that maybe, I want you, maybe if you could talk a little bit about that and about how you sort of, when you first read the character of Frank and what you thought and then sort of what your process of, finding that character is.
Yeah. So, well, first off, I usually read a script a couple times so I can, try to absorb it more and more and just to figure out, what this guy is going through, what makes him say what he says and act, the way he does. And Frank is not a man of many words, as you can tell. He's a restless homicide detective, and he's had a rough upbringing. So he's put everything into his work, and he's climbed the ranks rather quickly, and he is all about his work, and it doesn't take away from his love life, but at the same time it does, if that makes sense. He doesn't mean to compromise his love life. He loves his wife, but at the same time, I think he goes back to work because he knows that that's the one thing that really won't ever betray him. Coming up in the system, I did some research there, what kids go through. He was an orphan, and then as
that's and there's a lot of backstory I think that you got that that isn't quite known a little bit. That's obviously not his kid, and that he's not actually able to have kids. We talked a little bit about, that's in the scene, and there was more that we kind of cut out in editorial, but also I think on the day a little bit, and then and do you do? And I think we talked a little bit about a backstory, and I know that not everybody does a backstory, and that one thing I've always felt like is that we don't necessarily need to have the same backstory as an act, like my backstory. And I think you made some choices with him that was a little bit different than what I had originally thought, but I really, I liked it. It's like, okay, that's what he's grabbing onto. I'm going to let him sort of run with that. But yeah, did you, did you deviate from any of the backstory? Did you come up with, do you like to write, sort of do a backstory for your characters?
Well, a combination. Partly, yes, with writing down some, some key points. I don't write out like a whole page. Some people do. That doesn't, always work for me. But, I think the best thing for me, from my process, is I do a lot of research. Like, this guy is an orphan. What it's like, obviously I'm acting, and I've never been an orphan, but at the same time, doing research of what these kids go through, what they're up against. So, I have some of this in my bones. The other thing is, being a homicide detective, I was fortunate enough to reach out to a friend who is a assistant district attorney down in Long Beach. So he made a call for me, and I got to actually sit and interview and sit and ask every kind of question I was allowed to with the main homicide detective down there. And on top of that, they let me do a ride along.
I was not down with that.
She wasn't down with that. And what we encountered just was pretty, I mean, there was some, it was pretty wild. So that type of research works best for me, as opposed to necessarily watching, say, a detective show, because I feel that's their interpretation based on their work they did. But not to say that I'm not inspired, but I love Luther. I love, Bosch. Those shows are just, to me, phenomenal. But yeah, that's my process, more or less, to really do as much research. And I was fortunate, like I said, to do that hands-on interviews with detectives, what they really go through, these homicide detectives. So,
and I've also seen you just like go in your bed and lie down and just like lay there and think about like, I'm a writer, I've read
yeah,
you just like stew in it.
I just like to stew, and as if how would I respond to that? Because I'm already like, I love this whole world. Angie's like, stop. I'm always got my nose in the streets and somebody trying to like help by nature. And I feel like that's my second profession.
Stuff happening.
That's more or less my process, for at least for this character and in general.
Great. And then Angie, I know that Maria is not the main character. Interestingly enough, in the in the feature version that I wrote, this is her only scene. But in the episodic version, and one thing I really loved about the idea of breaking it out into a series was that I get to have another storyline, another character, somebody who can, this is sort of the beginning of the end. It's the end of their marriage. It's kind of what sets him free. But there's more to this. I know we have talked about, she's going to come back into it, and but your process for upon reading this, what's your sort of way of breaking down your characters? So you mentioned a little bit about the difference between you and Chris, about how you sort of work a little bit.
Yeah, when I'm working on anything, whether it's an audition or an actual job I'm going to be shooting, depending on like the emotional level of the scene or what's happening in the story, I usually will end up writing something out. I like to do a character map, which is something I learned from one of my acting coaches, where it's basically like you have your character's name in the middle, and then you have branches off of everyone and everything that's in the scene or in the storyline, and then their names, and then how you feel about each one. So there's that, and then another thing, like if it's a relationship driven thing, especially with like a breakup or something heavy like that I need to feel that weight, is all music is huge for me, huge in my preparation. So I will pick like their song that like they had when they were first dating, and I'll just listen to that and kind of write like when they first met, some of their special memories and stuff like that. So that way it's actually sad for me, when it's that kind of thing. Like if I have to like cry in a scene or something like that, I have to I cannot cry just from nowhere. It has to be like musically driven and, and then the other thing is I just like to find whatever thing the character has that is like me, because that just, to me, it's an easier way in. Like, what would I do in this situation? I'm not so good at just like creating this whole different separate thing for myself. For me, it's much easier. Like, what would I do? So I find ways, the things that the character and I have in common, in order to get into them better.
Yeah, I feel like if we can't personalize, as actors, then it's just coming from a, more of a
imagination.
More of a fake
I'm more of a
place.
substitution, personalization kind of actor.
Yeah, well, it's something that it's like if you do start to veer a little bit, you always have something to ground you, something to bring you back to that moment. So does Maria have a song?
I'm sure I have it written down, but I don't remember what it was.
It's been a while.
So I wonder. It's been so long. I mean, this was when we did this. I had just had our second baby, and so I was taking breaks to like go breast pump in the bathroom. So my memory of that time is like,
oh yeah. Well, great. No, that's I think those are things that interestingly, for directors, they come to a lot of it come to it from a very technical standpoint. They come to directing from either from the visual end of it, the technical aspect of it, and then working with actors is always sort of the scary part.
into your plan.
Yeah, exactly. It's I have this great vision, and what do you mean? You're not going along with it. It was interesting is that you gave me some script notes. You said, how about we change this line to this, and I'm very open to that because I definitely believe in having sort of an open mind. You have to be able to come to it and discover things. And I did a little bit of storyboarding, but I knew that when I got to the set, when we did the rehearsals, I was going to want to kind of figure out the blocking with my actors a little bit. I mean, I had definitely a shot list prepared, and just for editorial purposes. But I think as far as blocking, it was a little bit of like, okay, well, in this scene when I always knew that Maria was packing, she was going to be on the floor, so that when Frank walked in, we framed him, we framed over her and saw him looming in the doorway. I always had those visions of it, but after that of walking around, and one thing about low budget stuff is that you don't get to use as much of the space that you want. So we kind of limited your movement a little bit, I think, Angie, and just, okay, you can't go too far over here and you can't go too far over there. But
figure out, it makes you work with what you know.
Yeah, exactly. So, as far as, a little bit about my work process, it was interesting is that I do a little bit of, I wear two hats on this. So I have, I wrote it and I'm directing it. And one of the first things as a director is that you cross out all of the screen direction. You just kind of break it down to just the dialogue and sometimes start with that. But those screen directions and some of those things you kind of point, you'll circle, things that sort of grab you. And I had to really close myself off from the writing part of it. And and come up with, Maria has a cross necklace, it was a visual, the badge, I think is a visual, those sort of things. Just so I'll highlight those, but a lot of stuff you just kind of, I just toss out my own writing, and then say, okay, well, here we are, and let's work out the scene. And so that was, I took a class years ago with Judith Weston, who wrote a book called Directing Actors. And, it was really, she makes you take an acting lesson. You basically are in class with a bunch of other non-actors, and you'll get to see what it's like to be on stage. And I just had another one of those moments last night when my 6-year-old daughter made me get up and do a dance recital. It's like, oh, okay, I'm on stage now. Now I know what that feels like. And so that's sort of so a lot of the scene analysis is very important for me, and to break it down, and then to come on set and rehearse with you guys was fantastic. Like I said, we got to rehearse this scene the weekend before, and it was great because I was able to get some notes from both of you, and then sort of include those in, and kind of rework a few things, and so that was really phenomenal. I think
that was a gift, by the way, because
both of us have written stuff and produced it, as you mentioned, and to see words that you wrote and went over and edited so many times and ran by other people and they liked it, and then it's going to get cut to like divorce from that stuff is so hard. But you really were I love that you were open to that, but on the other hand, there was things that you knew, that's important that I keep that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you were just like, oh sure, like to whatever suggestion we made. You were open to some, and then you knew the other stuff that was important.
The collaboration it's obviously key, and it was great. I mean, you took what we had to say, just so and if we didn't per se didn't want those to say those lines, we had a reason, but then you came back, like Angie just said, and said no, because this is important, it's key,
so then our job is to go, okay, well then how can I make that make sense for me?
Right. Yep.
No, I just read the other day that Stanley Kubrick on 2001, he was very open to input, from people, from his actors as well. One of the actors on that came up with the idea that when they were in the pod talking and sealed it up, that Hal could read their lips, and it's such a huge pivotal moment in the film that I was like, holy crap, like that was, and he said, yeah, that's great, let's use that. And so you see it and you're like, okay, you always think like, oh, he's a genius, and it's like, well, maybe he's just surrounding himself. That's part of it, is knowing when those ideas are like, oh, okay, that's a great idea, let's use that, and being open to that. And
moments, that's magic happening, and it's you didn't write it per se, but the writing, and the interpretation of how the actor, like I said, interpreted that's where these spontaneous moments come in, and they become so memorable in so many movies that I read and hear about so much, that they're
often mistakes.
Exactly, or they weren't even written. Yeah. So it's that's just so important, because you can get locked into, I understand, like when we do TV, we can't change normally a line on network television, not Grey's Anatomy.
Especially like we go out, we're not like we're not leads of television shows. They're going to have than we are when we come on as a guest.
Right. So just coming in for, day 2 or 3, depending on the role, it's, we're limited, but we've been fortunate too, though, if we have questions, of course, that, the directors or producers are, they'll answer them, and, so you're on the same page, but you don't get what
right. You don't say, I'd like to change this line, just so nobody gets any ideas. Like, hey, everybody else seems to be open to it. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think your where you are in your hierarchy on a TV show really depends on how much you can request changes or not necessarily request, but make suggestions.
Yeah.
But I know that, just working on television shows, there is room for a lot of, especially if it's in your ballpark, for visual effects. If it's in my ballpark, it's like, oh, you know what, that's a good shot, but maybe you should put the camera over here because that's a better shot. That's so a lot of this. So there's a lot of still openness to that. But yeah, certainly, changing a line, I think, it helps if the writer is the director, because then they can agree right then. But on a regular television show where you have separate writers, the writers, they don't really want anything messed with, even if the director kind of sometimes wants those changes.
It is funny how film is opposite from TV in that way. Like film, it's like the director is it, usually the writer's not even on set, and then TV is so different.
Yeah.
Director is like usually someone that came on just for that one episode.
Mm-hmm.
So they have less.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just, so we got to rehearse.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of fun. Talk a little bit about that. I know, one of the things that we did, and a lot of on TV shows, is just read the lines. We'll just do come together, let's read the lines. A lot of TV shows don't get to do a read through, which I guess is kind of what we got to do a little bit. Is so on a lot of television shows on HBO, on True Blood, we always had they had a read through. So all the actors would come in one day, and you just read the script from start to finish, and that was just a way to sort of get everybody into the same circle. And so our rehearsal was a little bit like that. So I think when when you guys came in, we got to do that rehearsal. I think we did a little bit of blocking. But one of the things that is once you're sort of running the scene and going through the lines before you even turn on the camera, is sort of making those adjustments. And is there anything that you guys use? I mean, Angie's mentioned about having a song. Is there anything that you use to get you in the moment in that, and the difference between doing your like a read through as opposed to then, okay, now I've got to get into that moment?
Well, for Angie or myself, I guess.
I think for both of you, I think, I just mentioned Angie because, she mentioned, the song, having a song or anything else. But if you have something that, what I found and what I do with, in the rehearsal process is making sure that the actors are listening to each other. I kind of knew that wasn't going to be an issue. Well, I don't know, maybe, people were married, but, making sure that you're in the moment is, it's a real challenge for actors, especially with all of everything else that's going on. And, one of the things I don't always like to do is look at a monitor when I'm directing. Is, it's kind of like, because you can't, looking at a monitor, you're looking at what you're getting, but you're not necessarily seeing, if the people are sort of making that connection.
That's interesting you say that, because I never thought about that, actually. Yeah. You coming from a director standpoint and watching the monitor, which is normally what ends up, on screen.
What the audience is going to see.
And what the audience sees, you find it more effective to actually watch the actors live, which is
well, especially in rehearsal. I think it's when you trust your cameraman. They're gonna, you frame it up, you light it, the sound guy mixes it, So really, as a director, you're kind of, if everybody else is doing their job,
Yeah.
My only job is to make sure that the performance is on key, is there. And I think that when you lock into sort of the viewfinder, or I know it's hard on a big show. On ours, it was very intimate, and there's only a few moments where it was like, okay, well, let's look at the framing, let's look at this. But I think that I know that there's a lot of like, okay, making those adjustments. One of the things that Judith Weston talks about in her book is sort of result direction. It's like I had a vision of how Frank was going to act, and I had a vision of how what was he going to say, what was he going to do, and I had to kind of take all of that out and see you perform it and say, okay, if it's not what I want, how do I get you to do that? And part of that is like giving sort of action verbs, like I need you to I need you to demand something from Maria. I had a few of them written down. I found my notes the other day, and it's accuse. You're kind of coming in and accusing her a little bit, in regards to leaving and where she's staying, and he knows damn well where she's staying. It's kind of like the process. So a little bit of I guess what I'm asking is, as an actor, when you're on that other side and you're trying to be in that moment, and is there something that brings you into that moment that you try and go back to? And I think, Chris, you mentioned your research, into some of that. I think that helps build some of that character a little bit for you. That is there anything that sort of that you fall back on to get back to that moment, or that you
like right before the camera rolls, you mean?
Yeah.
The same, because we also, when we have auditions, we self-tape each other. A lot of auditions, especially now, are self-tape, and so we see each other's process, and I know that we both kind of just need 30 seconds before we begin to just like get into that little moment before, they call it, it really is that, like, what are you thinking right now? How do you feel right now before you begin? Like, just like a little moment,
If I know, which I do, when I know what's about to happen, you don't want to play what's about to happen, right? You want to be in the moment. There's a fine line, so you don't want to act, so to speak. You want to really personalize. You want to know what your goal, what your objective is in the scene, and you want to win what that objective is. You want to win, but at the same time, you don't want to jump ahead. So it's moment to moment, and I really listen, so it takes the focus off me, which is hard sometimes because as actors, it's the most important thing. It's more important than any of the words you say, no matter what. And we learn that in classes. So, I mean,
and it's so hard to put into practice because it's just like automatically you're thinking about what yourself and what you're going to do and how you're going to say it. And you've rehearsed it. And are you going to say it? But it's so much more important to listen to what they say and then let your line be, a result of what they just said, right? And it's so hard to check yourself during that. And there will be scenes I've done that I've realized, like, wow, I don't even know what just happened then. And that could either be a really good thing because you were just totally in it and not thinking about yourself, or it could be like, I was thinking about something else and just saying the lines. It's all a mystery, but as long as you can check yourself,
I think
at the beginning of the scene and try to be ready to be
listening 100% and give yourself your all to the scene
and not play ahead, like not play the end of the scene.
Right. So
in the beginning.
But we know the basic structure. We know what our emotional, what our emotional feelings are at that time. Whether it's you're sad, but then you don't always want to show your cards either.
And you want every scene needs to go somewhere, no matter how long or short. So you got to figure out with that little where you go in the scenes.
And I think, the relationship with myself and you in there in the first scene, especially
Frank and Maria.
Frank and
What are
Maria.
their names?
No, what I'm saying is, like, it seems typical, like, in normal relationships, that Frank would be yelling, "Blah, blah, 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 blah," but he's so contained and methodical, and he's learned that from his childhood to almost shut down.
Calculate,
It looks
yeah.
like he shut down and checked out, and
Which is infuriating for Maria.
which is infuriating for you, yes,
Like,
but
fight with me, like, be here with me.
but he just doesn't do that. So his mind goes to the work because that's his security. That's what I found. So that's why it wasn't even watching. I'm like, oh, is that the strongest choice? But at the time, I feel like that's what he's feeling. And I was even
Yeah.
like,
Watching yourself
it's
is
hard. I was like, is
the
this
worst
not
thing
enough?
in the world.
Is this not colorful enough? But Frank is not colorful.
He's just not.
He's thinking what he's thinking, and
Sometimes it's more fun for an audience to get to project their feelings onto. It's
Yeah.
more when someone is more of a mysterious blank slate like that and not showing the audience always what they're feeling. It's more exciting for the audience to
hopefully.
project onto. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, absolutely. That's I think that not playing to the end of the scene. It's sort of like being in the moment. You don't really necessarily know your character is not necessarily going to know what's supposed to happen. So you have to sort of be in the moment for that. Yeah, that's which was my biggest struggle when in my acting class was being very self-conscious and self-aware and trying to play to that moment. I think that's I appreciate it so much more than after I've tried it, and then of course after my dance recital, it's I'm just waiting for my end moment. But that's great. I think. There was, I had some questions in regards, because, I get to see how a lot of other directors work from a, being on set, and I know a lot of the directors, do a little bit, or a little bit. Everybody's a little bit different. Some are actors, directors. I've found, they come from theater. They're much more, giving notes and giving adjustments at each scene. But how have you found sort of some of the directors that you've worked with and that range? And like you said, you're not sort of in some of these shows, you're not at that level, and most people are not going to be at that level. And then how you handle your getting direction or processing that direction.
I feel like if you're not getting direction, it's probably a good thing. But I have a really hard time with that. Like, I don't know that I need the validation or that I just want, give me something to play with. I don't know, but having no direction is really hard. And on TV, especially if you're coming in for a couple days, as long as you're doing everything and saying your line's fine, like they got to move and they're like, okay, great, moving on. And then you have to go home and the whole drive home be like, they hated me. I wanted me gone.
Yep.
And it's really that you were just fine and like you did your job and great. If it was unusable or they hated, they would have said something. So
Yep.
there's
Right.
that. But so that's how it seems to be on TV, when you're coming on as a guest. The times that I've worked on a couple films, one that was on Netflix, one that was on Lifetime.
You were the lead in those.
I was the lead in those. So there's definitely more. I mean, all day, every day is connection with the director. So I
And
like
those were
that
12,
better.
13-day shoot. So there's,
Yeah.
right?
You're shooting a movie in 13 days. So you're with it for 12 hours a day. And I like that better. I like collaboration because otherwise my brain just says, you suck. He hates you. She hates you, whoever the director is. And just quit. Like, I need to know that.
Right. Either one side or the other. Right. It's, you
Yeah.
know, you need to.
I worked once with Ryan Murphy, and he doesn't say a lot. I feel like this man must have 18 billion things going on in his head, but he just there was one scene where there were 3 takes, and it was like a crying thing. And speaking of crying, I hear my baby crying.
You can keep talking. I'm gonna cut out for a second and go take my little baby.
Okay.
Oh my God, he's a slave to his little baby girl. But you know,
No.
like I did a couple takes. Then he just came over and whispered. I love when like it's a big set and the director just comes and talks to you privately instead of shouting to you from across the room, which I've also had, which is so embarrassing and belittling. Like I've had a director be like, "That doesn't look like you're doing anything. What are you doing?" Everybody,
that's not helpful.
quietly in my ear was like, "Okay, now try one with this," and then left.
Mhm.
Did that. Came over. He said, "Are you happy?" I said, "Are you happy?" He said, "I am if you are." I said, "Okay, great." And that was it. That is all I need. I just need to be like, "Are we good? Good. Yes."
Yeah. I think one of those things is knowing when to circle that take. You know, that's the and your actors appreciate that. You know, when you can say, okay, you know, this is
Do it.
you know, that was good.
So
What's that?
we'll do it 14,000 times if we can.
Oh, yeah.
If we don't stop
Right.
us. It's great to have a director who's like, "I got it. I'm good. You're great."
Yeah. Yeah, I think we only had one. Well, there was one. I remember there was one time where there was like it was one take, and I was like, nope, that's it. Let's move on. And it's like, but there are other times when you're like, okay, you know, but okay, yeah, you know. So there was some other things that you know I wanted to ask, just as far as you know on the acting side, you know, because I got an interesting message request from somebody on Instagram about advice, you know, for wanting to be an actor, wanting to pursue acting. First, I thought it was awfully strange. Like, well, I'm not an actor, but I'm, you know, I'm happy to point you in the right direction. But you know, and I got a lot of these questions when I had my first short out years ago, and it was like, what's your advice for people up and coming or coming, you know, wanting to get in the business? And you know, one of my first answers, of course, was don't do it. You know, and, you know, if you can do anything else,
Anything else you want to do?
do it. You know, and then when I thought about it, I was like, well, that's kind of a rude answer a little bit. But I guess my thought was that if I can convince you not to do it, then you shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
You know, and but you know, just on the acting side, like what advice would you give to somebody who's sort of who wants to follow an acting career but isn't quite sure if it's right for them, or if they know it's right for them, but you know, do they need to move to LA? Do they move to New York? You know, I think I mean, obviously now nobody's really moving anywhere, but I think, you know, but
I would say training. Okay, training is to me first and foremost. I mean, because then you can get an audition, say because they like your look for whatever the look is right for, and then you get thrown in with the wolves, and you, you know, have no idea what you're doing. So first and foremost, like any sports, an athlete will tell you, you got to be out there practicing. So my suggestion would be find and look up and audit and start participating in some of the top acting schools with teachers. And you go from there. I mean, that's the basic thing that you can do. And don't even worry about an agent or a manager yet. Just really train. You know, you want to get bigger muscles, you want to become faster, hit the pavement, start running. You know what I mean? So it's that repetition. Then you'll learn the basics of acting, as we're still learning and growing every day. And then I don't think you ever, you know, if you say that you got this, you know, good for you. But I know veteran actors, you work with veteran actors and series regulars who've been in it for a long time, and they're always constantly trying to better themselves and learn and grow. So, especially like actors just starting off, that would be my recommendation. Find and really look up some solid acting teachers and find, there could be 7 or 8, but you don't necessarily mesh with, say, 5 of them. So, find somebody that you feel a connection with too, like any kind of relationship would be my suggestion. And then you take it, you find some representation and you ask your friends.
Well, when you get into an acting class, you start meeting other actors.
So,
And then that's when you start building your network, and you have people who live in that same like mindset as you.
And then you'll start making things together. So
Yeah.
you'll know what it's like before you get on a big stage, the world stage, so to speak. You'll know what it's like, doing something in your living room or a friend's house.
It's
Or
less scary.
it's less scary, it's less foreign. So the more you can do that, and
then you meet with that Asian finally, and they're like, "Oh, great! What tape do you have?" You're like, "Here, I shot this."
so those are really good, I think, basic starting points that can really get you going.
Mhm.
Voila.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, no, I think as far as, directing, there isn't really sort of there's a few directing classes, there's a few directing avenues, I kind of came to directing a little bit late. I always, knew I wanted to write, but then, directing I directed a short film a long time ago. And then, the process was a lot different. I think then in getting it, once you made it, you then had to market it, and there wasn't this online marketing. It was, you had to go to festivals, you had to actually physically go to them, you had to actually physically send them a film, or we had DVDs, so you could market it out on DVDs, but it was it was a lot different. So you made a film, and it was so exhausting that then the marketing was the next part. And it was like you're only halfway up the mountain, or you're already at the top of the mountain, but you're only halfway. The top of the mountain is only halfway. You still have to get down. So this is so now I'm back. Now it's like, okay, if you want to see your stuff on the screen, directing is the way to do it. And learning to produce, and knowing. I sort of know how to put something together. It's not my passion, but I know how to do it. So that was, part of the impetus for this was just to go ahead and just, say, let's do it. So, my advice is just pick up a camera and start shooting something and make it yourself, because that validation is really hard to come by. And it's hitting the festivals, it's doing really well so far. I mean, right now they're just online festivals. We just episode 2 will be screening on I think on the Liftoff. I just got notified today, so that's good. And there's some others that will be coming up, so we'll find out some more. It's playing at the Valley Film Festival. The
5 film festivals already in this short time, John. We've got thousands, viewers already, and I'm not surprised, because I really think it was well written. That's what first drew me to it, aside from being friends with you. But there's other friends I've said no to other projects because I just didn't think it was right. But this was a no-brainer, and John, you're like the man in town when, True Blood, people out there, John is the head supervisor for special effects. These are big time shows that Emmy wins and overall nominations on top of that, upon nomination as well.
Visual effects, but
visual effects.
Visual effects, yeah. No, everybody gets that. It's actually in the Emmy category. It's called special visual effects, which is so you're not wrong. Special effects. Visual effects kind of took over a lot of what special effects used to do.
Okay. Visual
but
effects.
so anybody watching, will include some links to once this is posted up again, and to the Valley Film Festival. We don't know what's going to happen with it in August. There's still some question about some of the theaters staying open. I think they're closed again now. So there were I'm just looking at some of the comments. There's very few people here. Just opening up for questions. If anybody's listening, if they want to type in a question, I do see the comments. This is my first live web stream. I know all the cool kids are doing it, so we had to do it. And if there's any questions, just type them in. I think one question was for Chris and Angie. How did you two meet?
Oh, geez.
We met in the most classic gross LA place, which is a gym.
It wasn't gross. It was a private gym.
When you hear people met in the gym, the
Right.
thing that comes to mind is like, oh.
And a friend of mine was training her. She was, I think you were 21 or 22 at the time.
Yeah.
And I just said, man, I was like, what is her name? He goes, no, she doesn't want to talk to anybody. I said, just, I
had specifically said, okay, look, if I'm going to train, I really need to focus on this. Like, I literally at that time, my manager was like, I have to get in shape. Like, I think I was going out a lot and just not taking care of myself. And she's like, you need to fix this.
So I ignored her. And
so I had told this trainer, I really don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want this to be like a meat market situation. I need to focus, like, and get in shape. No problem, whatever. So when Chris asked him about me, he shut it down. So when I would go to Chris, I was like, oh, there's nothing there. There's no like reciprocation or whatever. And that went on for 4 months of us not knowing the other was interested.
Because you told the trainer. But anyway.
Because your friend kept knocking it down.
Yeah. And he came in, I kind of like just let it go, whatever. And he came in one day wearing a hat, like a baseball cap, and that is my weakness.
She liked me in a hat.
Came like strutting in his hat, and I was okay. Like, it was very third grade. I was like, you have to tell him I like him, see what he says, and it was like that. It was very like, tell him I like him, and and do you here's her phone number. It was like that kind of.
Oh, like a schoolyard.
First date, and from that point on, we've been together ever since, and that's 15 years in April. Married 10 years coming up in October, and 2 kids, and here we are working together, which is pretty cool.
Well, I'm very fortunate to. I tell Eden, my wife, all the time, like, I can't believe I've known Chris all this time, and I never thought of him as like, I just. So thank you guys. I mean, you guys did an amazing job on the show. I mean, and what's interesting is that, I always had this vision of, who Frank was going to be, and who Maria was going to be, and then it's like now I can't envision anybody else other than you two in the roles. I mean, that's so I think you guys did an amazing job of just really like solidifying those roles, and we only have 2 episodes.
Wait to get back at it.
We have to get back at it. Yes. So, another link that I will be sending out is we have a Indiegogo fundraising campaign.
Donate.
You want
I know it's a really challenging time for a lot of people. I know a lot of people are not working, and I get it. If you are able to contribute, please feel free to follow the link, take a look. There's some perks on there. I think if people who didn't catch any of that, Chris is a trainer. One of those perks is that he will train you if you're in LA.
Yes.
And so I want to. What's that? What's that?
I said he doesn't even train me. He won't even train me. You'd be very lucky to have him.
I got to make room for other people.
Right.
Yeah. Right. But thank you two for joining me with this. This is our first of our series. It's something I've always I had a vision of us, doing this in the at the location, which is my house. and having, you know, having set up with chairs and everything, but you know, this is what we have to do now. And so, but thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for
you.
casting us, and it's an honor to be working with you. And
Likewise.
Let's keep going.
We're excited about the future of Frank James.
Yeah. Yeah. So the plan is, you know, so when we will see more, hoping we will get to more shooting this fall if all goes well, and getting some more episodes out before the end of the year. So, but that all depends on if, you know, that if people are starting to get back to work, places are starting to open, but we'll see how that,
People look back in 20 years and be like, oh yeah, we couldn't shoot anything because of COVID.
Yeah. It'll be tough. So, but all right. Well, thank you everybody, and thank you for joining us. And this will be, hopefully, will be up for a while. So I know it's late on the East Coast. So, but this was like, you know, babies babies asleep. Got to put the kids to bed. So, well, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Angie. We'll talk soon. And thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Be safe. Thanks for watching.